Hello and welcome to On Location. This edition, what is a notary public? We'll be discussing the many facets of a notary, their longevity, interesting background and tidbits, as well as actually speak to working notaries with their hands-on experience. I'm your host, Fabi Combs. A notary is otherwise known as a notary public. They're public servants with proven integrity, officially commissioned under a state government in the USA and under the church in England. But do we really know what they do? Everyone, undoubtedly, sometime in their life will need the services of a notary public. Generally speaking, a notary is an official appointed to serve the public as an impartial witness. They have the authority to acknowledge and identify signers and their signatures and administer oaths and other affirmations. Notaries represent one of the oldest and smallest continuing branch of the legal profession worldwide. They trace back to the ancient Roman Republic before Cicero, the Roman philosopher, and approximately 100 years before Christ. In England and in Wales, it was the Pope who appointed notaries until 1532. Since England broke with Rome, the notarial authority is under the Archbishop of Canterbury, under the jurisdiction of the Crown. Some interesting notaries you may not be aware of. Renowned notary from Florence, Italy, was the father of Leonardo da Vinci, famous artist and scientist. Colorful figure Judge Roy Bean, also known as the Law west of the Pecos, in the mid-1800s was a notary. Samuel Clemens, otherwise known by his pen name Mark Twain, was a notary. Renowned Montreal notary Lionel Siegel drew up the marriage contract for Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor's first wedding in 1964 in Canada. More recently, today multifaceted celebrity Jennifer Lopez was also a notary. Joining me now is Cheryl of Cheryl's Mobile Notary Service here in Orange County, California. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you became a notary?
Yes, I actually lived in Nevada. I worked for a timeshare company, and they required us to become a notary so that we could notarize the mortgage documents for the new owners. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you moved back here and became a notary in California?
Yes. I worked for a bank in Sacramento where I got my commission at the Capitol. So.
Oh, the state capitol. You actually did your swearing in at the state capitol.
Yes, I did. It was great.
That's kind of unusual.
Yeah.
And so to actually have qualifications to be a notary here in California, what would those be?
You need to be 18 years or older, you need to be a legal California resident, and you need to be able to read, write, and understand English.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Now, if someone wanted to become a notary, what are the steps involved? Can you go through those briefly?
Yeah. You need to take a 6-hour course that varies in cost depending on where you go, and then you'll take an exam, which is provided by the CPS. It's about 30 questions or so, and you have to pass with 70% or better.
Oh, wait a minute now. What happens if you don't pass?
Then you have to take it again, and you can't do that for 30 days. It's one testing every 30 days.
I see.
So, but probably will pass. And then after that, you send in your application and your paperwork to the Secretary of State. They approve it. You'll have your background check and your fingerprints, and then you'll be able to purchase your notary supplies.
Well, on getting your fingerprints and background, how does one do that?
Wherever you go to take your testing, they have that available to you there.
I see.
So you can do your live scan, and the background check is done by the Secretary of State. They do that for you on your application.
And once that is all done and it is submitted to the Secretary of State, how long does it take before you actually get your commission in the mail?
6 to 8 weeks.
So what follows taking the oath from the county recorder?
You have to purchase your bond, which that protects the people, and your errors and omissions, which that protects me.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
And then you purchase your supplies?
Yes. Then you purchase the supplies, and you start marketing yourself.
Can you briefly go over them with us?
Sure. I have my journal here, which is where I record all the notaries that I do. This has the information and fingerprints depending on whether it's a mortgage document or not.
Oh, so this has to do with property only with the fingerprints?
Yes.
I see.
And then I have my English fingerprint pad, which is what I use in there, and my stamp, which has my name, my commission number, the county that I was commissioned, and the expiration date.
Okay. Now, let's say a commission lasts for how many years?
4 years.
4 years. Okay. In some states, I guess it's 5, I understand.
Uh-huh.
When you're finished with your first commission, to renew, what do you have to do to renew?
It's practically the same. The only difference is it's a 3-hour refresher course versus a 6, and that is only if your commission does not expire before your new commission is accepted.
I see.
So if it is a lapse in time, then it's a 6-hour refresher course.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's what the difference is. Now, when you're a notary in a state, in this case California, how far can you travel?
Anywhere in the state of California.
Okay, so
Yes.
it's not broken down to counties. It
No.
has to do with the notary, how far they want to drive.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. And as far as fees go, I know there's a set fee in each state.
Now, a notary can vary with their other charges that they charge, whether those could be mobile fee, printing fee, faxing fee, things
I
of
see.
that sort.
And how much is a jurat? And that's saying an oath.
Yes.
Can you give us some examples of where a mobile notary might go?
Sure. An office. I've gone to homes before, nursing homes, hospitals, coffee shops, restaurants. I've even met people in parking lots before. So yeah, it's whatever's convenient, whatever works out the best.
If you were going to give some advice to someone out there that maybe at this point in their life have never been to a notary, what would you tell them?
Number one thing is proper identification. Driver's license, identification card, a military ID, passport, an inmate card, those such things.
I see. And what if they're expired?
Within 5 years is okay.
Great.
In addition to that, I would advise them to look on the Secretary of State website and make sure that the notary that they're going to use is currently active. Be upfront with the notary as to what fees they're going to charge so that you're not going in blindfolded. Lastly, I would say feel comfortable with the notary that you're working with, because that's your personal documents that you're having witnessed, and you want to feel comfortable with who you're working with.
Well, Cheryl, I'm comfortable with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we'll be talking to Dominic Mestis, another working notary, with further information. Hi, Dominic. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
How long have you been a notary?
I've been a notary for going on 6 years now.
And your company is the OC Notary.
That is correct.
So do you stay strictly in Orange County, or do you go all over?
You know, I've been known to go as far north as San Francisco, but typically I like to keep it closer to home. I service San Diego, Riverside, Los Angeles, and San Bernardino counties.
I see. Okay. And is it necessary to be a certified signing agent? I see that every once in a while.
You know, it's not necessary, it's not required by law, but it definitely is recommended, especially for a new and novice or upcoming notary, to really keep abreast of any new laws that are affected with the real estate market. So specifically it caters towards loan document signings.
I see. Now there's different organizations out there that help up-and-coming notaries and answer questions, like the National Notary Association. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. The NNA in particular, they offer a wonderful service. They do have a hotline that you can call, especially if you're unsure about a certain law or whether or not a document is legal to sign or not, and if you're doing everything according to the letter of the law. So NNA does supply a wonderful wealth of information for you, and it's either a click away or a phone call away. So,
as a former notary myself, my husband and I actually went to a National Notary Association convention, and my goodness, they had so many classes and so much wealth of information, and they have the hotline, so we were members of that. And I agree with you, it really gives you a wealth of information.
absolutely. I've been a good standing member for as long as I had my commission. I will continue to be a member, and and the fact that they offer you the bond that is required as a notary as well. So.
Can you tell me what a Notario Publico is?
Certainly. In certain Latin countries, or more specifically in Mexico, a Notorio Publico is somebody who offers legal advice. They're not an actual attorney or lawyer, but they can do legal services and give legal advice. Now, the reason it is against the law here in the United States to advertise as a notarial publico is because these people who are from these countries would have automatically an assumption that you are able to offer legal counsel. And as notary publics here in the United States, we are not able to offer that service.
I see.
So that essentially is what the notarial publico is and why we are not allowed to advertise as such.
Well, speaking of that, do you have to be a legal citizen in the state of California where you practice to have something notarized?
No, you don't. Regardless of your citizenship, you can have a document notarized.
Okay. Also, can you tell me about if someone is incarcerated and they want to get married?
In that event, a notary will get a form called an inability to appear form, appear before the inmate, have the document notarized, transfer it to the spouse, who will then apply for a marriage certificate so that they can get married.
I see. Only certain documents can be certified.
That is correct. There are only 2 items that a notary public can certify as original copies. The first of which would be a journal line item out of their own journal. The second would be a power of attorney, and it would also have to be a power of attorney that they originally notarized. So in which case they can certify a copy of that original power of attorney.
Can a notary refuse service?
A notary can refuse service if they suspect fraud or if the individual does not have the proper identification.
Can a notary give any advice as to their document or explain a document to them or anything in that order?
Absolutely not. A notary public should never give any legal advice.
Can you help someone verify the validity of a form or help them fill out a form?
Absolutely not. This is also a no-no.
Okay. All right.
You should never tell somebody whether or not the document is valid. All you can do is attest to the fact that the signature belongs to the person who is signing it.
Now, when someone comes in to have something notarized and they have to produce their identification, what do you look for on that identification?
There's certain key items that we need to see. Obviously, the first of which is a photo identification. Mm-hmm. There also needs to be an expiration date, an issue date, mm-hmm. a description, physical description of the individual who's signing, and a serial number.
I see.
These are the elements that we need.
And we learned earlier today that Cheryl had explained that it can even be used if it's expired within 5 years.
That's correct. As long as it's been issued within the last 5 years, you can still use it to validate that person's identity.
Can you explain what a credible witness is?
Yes. In the event that an individual doesn't have a valid form of identification, a credible witness can be used. In particular, you would need 2 individuals who can personally vouch for the individual who does not have the identification, as long as they both have valid IDs.
I see. Can you do digital signing online?
In the state of California, we cannot. There's a few other states that have outright refused to do digital signings. And then again, there are a few states that do allow it. So in California, no.
When do you actually need to do fingerprints for someone that you notaries for?
As required by law in the state of California, you need to have a fingerprint in regards to any document pertaining to real estate, mm-hmm. grant deed, quitclaim deed, etc. Mm-hmm. However, I find it's best practice is to take a fingerprint whenever I do an acknowledgement. It just provides that much more security for myself and the individual who's signing the document.
Mm-hmm. Can you ever notarize for someone that's not present?
Absolutely not. That is the biggest deal breaker ever. You do not want to sign for anybody who is not present.
Where are you supposed to keep your journal and your stamp and your seal, your supplies?
Ideally under lock and key. You should always keep them in a safe place. I have a fireproof safe to keep my journals in when I'm not using them. Mm-hmm. But definitely under lock and key. You want to keep them as safe as possible.
What if, for instance, you had someone that appeared before you and the document said John Smith and they signed as John J. Smith?
I typically only go off of what the identification says. Mm-hmm. And regardless of what the document is, they should match up because I can only attest to the signature, the signer, and his identification.
Okay.
So,
if there was a natural disaster and you lost your seal and you lost your journal, what would you do?
I would hate to have a natural disaster occur, but I would immediately notify the Secretary of State and let them know that my book and my stamp has been compromised to prevent any incidents of fraud.
I know for myself, one of the things that we had to do when we moved, we had to notify the state of California, Secretary of State,
absolutely.
to let them know we moved, and then when we were ready to resign our commission, we had to do the same by
Correct.
letter.
Yeah, and you have to turn your books in as well, so that
Yes.
you keep that. Yeah.
We turned it into the recorder office. Dominic, what if a ID looks suspicious?
In that event, I would have to ask for another form of identification, be it a passport, a military ID. If they didn't have any other supporting documentation, I would probably have to refuse service.
Well, thank you so much today.
Oh, thank you
You've
very
been a lot
much
of
for
help,
having me.
a lot of great information.
Appreciate it.
Next, we'll be chatting with Tim Levins, another seasoned notary. Welcome, Tim. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Now, your company is Performance Notary, and you've been involved since 2004.
Correct.
And can you tell me the specific types of notaries you do? I know there's quite a few different types, but what would you say the majority of your business is?
Probably 50-50 foreign documents and business documents.
Speaking of foreign documents, can you tell me what an apostille is?
It's a document be used in a foreign country.
Can you give me some examples of an apostille, how someone would need an apostille?
Adoption is more of the commonly used, or medical patents to be used in other countries.
Anything to do with property?
Yes, power of attorneys is widely used. That's a number one of a norm. I wouldn't say normal, but the individual would use a power of attorney. Most companies don't use a power of attorney.
And what percentage of that in your business?
50%.
Really?
Yes.
So you're kind of an expert in that field.
I've done very many of them. Yes.
Tim, if someone were to call you and they wanted something legalized as far as a document and authenticated, what does that mean actually?
Authenticated process is done at the county level. Some countries do ask for authentication, but normally that's done at county. Legalization is done at the embassy or consulate level. And it basically takes the process of notarizing the document, verifying the notary by the county, and then the state would certify the document, and then it would go on to the embassy or consulate to get legalized.
Sounds like quite a process.
Yes, it is.
And speaking of that, what kind of fees would someone incur to have something like that done?
Anywhere from $150 to over $1,000 for
My
one
goodness.
one document.
But there's a lot of legwork on your part.
When you do legalization, that must be done through Washington.
I
So
see.
you have the Department of State involved too.
And what about an apostille?
The apostille normally stops at state level, and that's a part of a process, members of the Hague Convention. And that means that the certification process of the document stops at state level.
And do a lot of notaries do apostilles?
No, they don't.
Do people come up to ask you for different forms when they come to see you? Do they expect you to have a power of attorney or a grant deed, what have you?
Yes, that's a common problem where people think that I have all the documents for everything they need done.
Now, if you were to go into a nursing home, we'll say, and they don't have a passport, they don't have an ID, driver's license, and they need help for financial and for healthcare reasons, are you able to do a notary there?
50-50 we can do that. For the financial we can, but for the health we'd have to bring in a California ombudsman.
And can you explain a little bit about that?
The ombudsman is somebody that is for patients' rights, and they're an advocate for people in long-term care. And the ombudsman would come in and talk to the patient, the client, and make sure that they are to the capacity to understand what they are doing, and they can make healthcare-related decisions.
So if you were then in a nursing home and they had trouble signing their name, but the doctor said that they were coherent and knew what they were doing, would they still be able to have something notarized if it had to do with health care as well as finances?
Finance, yes. You'd bring in credible witnesses, people that can tell me who that person is and under oath swear to that fact. And then as far as trouble signing, that's not a problem because we can notarize something by a mark.
Really?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
yes. So that's a way, and they can use if they can't use their hands, they can use their mouth, as long as they make the mark.
Have you ever had to do a notarization for someone that's blind?
Yes, I have.
You have to have someone interpret.
As long as I can communicate with the person, that's all that I need. The person must have already had prior knowledge to what they're signing. They have to understand it completely. And that would be something I would ask the person signing the document.
And that would be advice that was given to them by someone else, or
Correct.
read to them by someone else.
Correct.
Not by you.
Correct.
I understand you had an interesting signing that took you 2 days. Can you briefly explain that?
It was a $400 to $500 million deal that was done, and 11 principals had to sign, and it came out to over 600 documents.
Wow.
It took,
No wonder it took 2 days.
well, we were fighting hand cramps.
My goodness. And something like that, when you're doing multiple signatures, you give a special rate, I would guess?
Oh, of course. Oh,
Yes.
oh, yes.
Now, one of the things that I realize with you that you actually give back to the community. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've been volunteering at the Huntington Beach Senior Center for probably 6, 7 years now. And it's a service that I can provide to the seniors to get their affairs or their documents notarized without a concern with cost.
That's great. Are there a lot of notaries that do things like that?
I know of 2, myself and another person that does every other week when I'm not there.
Now, other than that, when you're actually doing notarizations, do you collect up front or do you collect after the signing?
It's always taught to you to collect up front, but I don't feel that's a good business practice. I feel to collect after the job has been finished completely.
Now, as far as going into prisons or jails, do you have to be on a type of approved list to go in?
Now, that is the case now. And with Orange County, you have to have a security clearance, and that's done by the county.
And what times can you go?
24/7, anytime. They never close for official business.
That's great. If a wife calls you and says, I need to get a notarization for my husband and myself, my husband works, can I bring some identification for him so that you can notarize both of our signatures?
No, the law states that you have to appear in front of a notary.
Ah, okay.
So he physically needs to be in front of me for me to notarize something.
And when someone calls you, what do you tell them before you go do a notary?
Make sure they have current and valid identification.
So I see you have your equipment here, and one of the things I noticed is your embosser. That's not used as much in California, is it?
Correct. I use that more for foreign documents. Foreign governments and that they recognize the embossed stamp more because anything that comes from a county, state, or federal is embossed on a piece of paper or gold seals.
And I understand too, to photocopy anything, this transfers much easier than the embossment.
Correct. Anything that's going to be recorded must be 100% reproducible. That's why we use a stamp.
Tim, what was your most unusual notary that you've ever done?
One does come to mind. It was a divorce settlement in a Circle K parking lot. And one of the people getting notarized didn't have their identification, so we had to bring incredible witnesses to identify the person. That brought more people to the parking lot, which made for more confusion.
Is there anything that you would like to add to people watching, maybe to be prepared for the next time they need a document notarized?
The most important thing is understand what they're doing and what they need a notary for.
Very good. Thank you so much for your information. It's been very valuable.
Thank you.
Did you know there are approximately 5 million notary publics worldwide? There are notaries in every country. The United States has the most notaries, and California leads the pack with about 168,000. In India, notaries serve as arbitrators, while in China, they're authorized to give instructions on the preparation of legal documents. Ink seals are more legible when a document is photocopied. However, Alabama and the U.S. Virgin Islands require an embossed or raised seal. Most states do not require a stamp and an embossing seal, but a good idea for further protection of the documents. A glossy surface fax document should never be notarized, as the printing will fade in time. Fax signatures cannot be notarized. California has a certified copy by document custodian form that is a hybrid, which is an acknowledgement where a signature is witnessed, and a jurat, which is attesting to or affirming by oath document combined. Some states do not require a journal, but it is a good idea to have extra documentation for any questionable situations in the future. Let's look at some fun and unique notarized items. Well-known singer of the Beatles group, John Lennon's authentic hair shaft was notarized. Legendary baseball player Hank Aaron's authentic notarized autograph. Another famous baseball player, Mickey Mantle, seen here with the notary who witnessed and notarized his signature. Here we have a great Hall of Fame baseball player that played for the Yankees, Lefty Gomez, with his notarized signature as well. Even a notarial service was performed for a brick that was affirmed to be from Abraham Lincoln's home. One of the Rams' original fearsome foursome, Deacon Jones' notarized signature on this football. Baseball star Ted Williams, who played for the Red Sox, notarized autograph also. Another hair sampling of the famous actress Marilyn Monroe with a notarized document and stamp